Unlike the steppe nomads, sedentary populations were the dominant powers in 1179 CE. To the far west of Eurasia, Europe was in the High Middle Ages, a time of Christian knights, lords and peasants. This is the time when the Pope was hugely powerful and launched crusades against the Islamic world. The Islamic world, however, was in the midst of a golden age. Baghdad was the single biggest city in the world and was full of mathematicians, philosophers and statesmen. They held a monopoly on world trade and had an iron grip on the Middle East. The Chinese kingdoms dwarfed both Europe and the Islamic world. With a huge population, advanced technology, and cultures that reach back thousands of years, the Chinese kingdoms were the most advanced on Earth. In the last lesson, much was made of how tough the steppe nomads were and how much they had terrified sedentary people through history. And this begs the question, if the nomads were so tough, then why were they not the ones building great empires? Well, it turns out that sedentary populations like the Chinese Jurchens and the Islamic Khwarezmians had a number of advantages over the Mongols. Within cities, they could build infrastructure, particularly blacksmiths, metalworkers, and engineering projects like dams and canals. On fertile land, they could grow more food and support bigger populations than the constantly moving nomads. These larger populations allowed for bigger markets, creating more wealth and more stuff. Lastly, and this cannot be underestimated, sedentary populations could protect themselves by building walls like those around Jurchen and Khwarezmian cities. Steppe nomads also had a number of disadvantages. They were a largely tribal culture of many competing nomadic groups. This meant shifting alliances and frequent raids where kidnapping and enslaving neighbouring tribes members was common. Even when tribes were united, these were usually reliant on a particular leader, and once they lost a battle or died, the unity quickly disappeared. While nomadic people were largely self-sufficient and saw city people as soft, they had to trade for key items that they couldn't make themselves, like good weapons and tools. To overcome these disadvantages, the Mongols would require an extraordinary leader. And in 1207, that's exactly what they got with the election of Genghis Khan. Usually historians like to stay away from individuals as main causes of historical events. They prefer to stick to big history, large forces such as climate changes, industrialization, religious and cultural conflict, migrations and demographic change. Genghis Khan, however, was undeniably one of the major factors in the Mongol expansion and continuation of the Mongol Empire after his death. He was, as the Mongols needed, an extraordinary individual. Despite the undeniable importance of Genghis Khan in the creation of the greatest land empire in history, we actually know very little about him. We don't know what he looked like. We don't know when he was born or where he was buried. We don't know how many children he had. We don't even know what he was doing with a large part of his early life. Despite these difficulties, historians have managed to build a picture through scouring scarce sources and a lot of hard inquiry. So what do we know about Genghis Khan? He was born Temujin around 1162 CE. His father, Yesugei, was a small-time Mongol Khan, or chief, who was poisoned by his enemies when Temujin was only small. Even then, Temujin was ambitious and tried to become Khan of the tribe. He was rejected due to his age, and he, his mother, and his brothers were all forced into poverty. Being cast out meant that the already hard upbringing of a Mongol nomad was even harder for Temujin. He was forced to eat rodents and carcasses. One day, when returning from a hunt, Temujin killed his older half-brother Begta. There are two stories about what happened that day. One account says that the brothers were just fighting over food. The other account says that Begta, as the older brother, was trying to take over the family, and Temujin killed him in order to ensure his own place as family leader. Is the first story true, or the second? Perhaps it's a bit of both. If you have an opinion and can make a good case for it, then you're in the same boat as experienced historians. As a teenager, Temujin was captured in a raid by a neighbouring tribe. If his life wasn't already bad enough, he was enslaved and put in a kang. The young captive earned the loyalty of his guard, however, and with the guard's help and some quick thinking, he escaped. At age 16, he married Borte. It was an arranged marriage, but Temujin always loved and respected Borte above all others, even later when he had many concubines. The importance of Borte to Temujin would be shown when Borte was kidnapped by a neighbouring tribe. Despite the difficulties and dangers, Temujin built a small army, assembled allies, and led a daring raid to rescue her. Borte had a child about 8 months after the rescue. He was named Jochi and was brought up as Temujin's oldest son, but questions always remained as to whether Temujin was actually the father of Jochi. Borte had 3 more sons, Chagatai, Ogedei, and Tolui. All 4 sons were brought up to be like Temujin, and, as they became old enough, would help him lead their own personal armies and rule parts of his empire. Over the next few years, Temujin grew a small force into a formidable army through cunning alliances, tactical genius, and the discipline to absorb defeated enemies into his own force. Temujin valued leadership, so much so that in 1201 he was shot in the neck by a talented enemy soldier. Rather than execute or punish the captured soldier, who was named Jebe, Temujin offered him a role as one of his commanders. Jebe accepted and became known as the Arrow. He would become one of Temujin's most trusted generals. After many years of fighting, Temujin finally united all the Mongol tribes, and, at a Kurultai in 1207, he was elected the Great Khan of the Mongols, and with his title came a new name, Genghis Khan. Who were the dominant powers in the 12th century? What advantages did sedentary people have? What disadvantages did nomadic people have? When was Temujin born? What were the names of his legitimate sons? In what year was Temujin renamed Genghis Khan?